Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Spirit Side Journey Towards the Light. I'm your host, Paul James Caden, and joining me this week on the show is Mr. Richard Warren, who is the author of many books that deal with fictionalized accounts of teachings and historical happenings in the Urantia Book. He has Resurrection Hall, Battlefield Guardians, and of course, the book we're going to be talking about on this show is The Non-Breathers and the First Fusers. And if you don't know what that is, it's pretty interesting stuff. So stay tuned. And Richard, welcome to the show. Thanks for doing this today.
Well, thanks, Paul, for having me back on. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. And we were going to do a video presentation, but we were having some Zoom issues, so we had to resort to the old audio format, but that's okay. Sometimes that happens. But anyhow, Richard, tell us, let's kind of break it up into sections here. Let's talk first about the non-breathers in the Urantia Book. What does it say about them? Who and what are they? And, a little bit how you might portray this in your book.
Yeah, my book is based in the revelations of the Urantia Book. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with that, but it's a gigantic revelatory tome about 2,100 pages. And one of the things it says that there are a whole variety of living beings on worlds like ours, and some of them don't have air, and some of them are host people who live in the water, and some of them are flyers. It depends on the gravity, but there's a tremendous variety of living beings on they say there will someday be 7 trillion inhabited planets in the whole time-space universe. But they say that one of those worlds is near us. They use the term close proximity. Now, as big as space in close proximity could be 5 light years from here.
Right.
Or it could be within our own solar system. And so I wanted to write a novel that was about the non-breathers who are living in this close proximity. And so I chose Ganymede, the largest moon of Jupiter, as a site to base this fiction on. And I had a probe launched by the space agencies here on Earth go to Ganymede and land on the surface. And to their surprise, they had a video hookup, and to their surprise, these beings, these non-breathers, appeared on their screen. And I then tried to imagine what all the reactions would be from the various sectors here back on Earth, how the religious community would react, how the scientific community and the philosophical academics would react to such a discovery. I believe when we do find the non-breathers or any other beings living in the universe, that it will be a big paradigm shift for our planet. Don't you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And one of the things I liked the way you did that particular book, were the reactions and, how the people tuned into the news. There were the reporters reporting on these, new findings, these new things that were happening. and how the people, kind of reacted to that. So I thought that was a kind of slice of real life, the people catching, bits and pieces of this and updates, on the news about these non-breathers and, what they were doing and, what it means to us. And let's delve a little bit, because I find it interesting. How do you think and how you portray it in your book, the way you think particularly the religious community will react, because some of them are very open-minded to life on other planets, life in other dimensions, and others say, no, we're it. God created the earth. He put man on the earth, and there's nothing else out there. So, my take on it is there's going to be people that, when that happens, I think it's only a question of when. There's going to be a lot of people that are afraid, a lot of people that are going to think this is something that is, demonic or satanic, is going to be very, very suspicious in their minds. But how do you think the religious community will react, and how did you portray that, in your book?
It's a great question. I think there will be a wide diversity of reaction. If the religious community believes it, and there's no denying it when they see the evidence. If it's so blatant as the way I've set it up in my book, there's a visual confirmation that these are actual beings, and they're living on a planet that apparently has no air, and the majority of the religious community will have to accept that there are beings on other worlds, and that will have a reflection on the Bible, of course, and every religion will have to modify its teachings about the beings. It's going to imply that there are beings living on millions and millions of planets, and we've had confirmation that there probably are planets like ours because of the new telescopes that they're creating, and they've discovered hundreds of Goldilocks zone planets like ours. But the Catholics are going to say, well, what we want to do is see if they know Jesus.
Right.
And they're going to proselytize them if they can. But there are many questions. Do they have a language? Since they have no atmosphere, I presume that they don't have a spoken language, because their sound won't carry in a vacuum, and they may not have ears. They may not have a mouth. They may not have a nose. They may just have gigantic eyes. The Urantia Book tells us that they're energized in a different way. They don't eat or drink like we do. So it's hard to say how the Buddhist community is going to react, and the Islamic community, but they are going to have to come to grips with the reality of it.
Right.
If the proof is definite, like it is in my book.
Now, do you think that some of the uptick in UFO activity we're seeing here on planet Earth, there seems to be more and more, every year, every month, it's everywhere. There's military people, there's civilians, everybody's saying they're seeing these crafts that, are way beyond our technology. Do you think maybe some of these non-breathers, and maybe explorations of the universe found us and they're already here, and that explains maybe they're observing or waiting for the opportune time to maybe make contact? Or do you think, what we're seeing is largely man-made or something else?
It's a great question. And the answer is I don't know. I just watched a movie. I don't know if you ever heard of The Phenomenon.
Yes, that was John Travolta, correct?
It was a documentary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, about all the sightings. And it was pretty darn convincing that a whole classroom of kids saw one, I think it was in New Zealand. And it was there for like a few hours, and they described it with perfect clarity. And I've always been a doubter, and I've always wanted, proof, absolute proof that there are beings here. But that, by the way, that documentary is available free on YouTube. It's called The Phenomenon, and there may be a movie with John Travolta by the same name. I'm not sure, but this is a documentary, and it takes the subject seriously, and it brings forth all the governmental and all the Air Force pilots and so many witnesses that seem credible, and they describe a similar craft. But in my book, I presumed that the non-breathers on Ganymede are at the early stage of their existence. They're not technologically developed. They're simply cave dwellers.
Right.
They have to live underground because there are frequent meteor strikes that are quite dangerous. The Urantia Book gives us a little insight into what an advanced non-breather society is like. They apparently can build shunts for meteors and lightning. And I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
and apparently they would have to be very advanced technologically to be able to create such a thing. The meteors, as we know, are very powerful rocks that come in at tremendous speeds. So I don't know the answer to your question, but apparently, it's not beyond imagination that there are beings who have advanced technology, who can maybe go many times the speed of light. We really are in our infancy technologically, aren't we?
Yeah, we definitely are. I was actually just a couple days ago reading on one of the Urantia groups on Facebook, and someone had put a post about the non-breathers, and someone hypothesized that, could some of them actually be, in the depths of our own ocean, because we've never been, way down there. And then there's the crevices in the caves down there that go even deeper into the earth. And, you have a lot of people that, of course, see these strange craft coming up out of the ocean or going into the ocean. So I thought that was an interesting point, whether it's, some kind of civilization or beings that came and set up shop in the ocean, or they've been there all along and we just don't know it.
Gosh, we don't have any definitive proof, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility according to all the presentation we have, revelatory presentations we have in the Urantia Book. I mean, they say that there are planets like Venus that can host beings called super breathers. And we know that Venus has a temperature of like 900 degrees on its surface. So the extent and the span of life, we really have to expand our parameters of what we're looking for life on worlds like ours that has water and air and a reasonable temperature. But the revelers tell us that no, there can be beings who live on planets that are extremely cold and extremely hot by our standards.
Yeah, I mean, some people may, have questions about that, but you look even here on Earth, there's that one, I forget what it's called. It looks like a little weird caterpillar-looking thing. It's microscopic, and they say it's one of the most resilient life forms on Earth. That it could live in the extreme heat, and a volcano, even survive in space, or even some of the harsh environments of planets beyond Earth, the cold, the heat. So if we have microscopic beings here on Earth that could survive those kind of, atmospheres and environments, well, why couldn't there be, other beings out there more advanced that adapted to those planets, those environments, and live there?
Yeah. Well, you can just imagine how the media would react if we found non-breathers or some other form of life here in the solar system. I mean, the world would literally stop and be glued to their TVs for probably at least a week, and that would be a subject of conversation at every dinner table for months on end. And in my book, I have the first probe go and because the non-breathers find the probe and they approach it, they have no idea what it is. And it just looks like a piece of strange machinery. Probably they think it's from some alien race or maybe somewhere else on their world. They just don't know. So I hypothesized that when that happens, that if that happened, that NASA and the other space agencies around the world would quickly mount another mission, and they would equip this probe with a two-way communication, so that we could transmit images from our world, and they could get an idea of what the purpose of that probe is. And so when that probe lands, it attracts a lot of those non-breathers, and they come around and they're watching the screen that has a picture of a typical human family, and it has a lot of scenery of trees and lakes and animals of all types, and we find out that they also have animals, which is one of the things that the Urantia Book tells us. But it says that their animal life is a whole different order than what we have here on Earth. So that was about as far as I took it. After a while, the non-breathers, they've got these two probes, and they think that they're probably of divine origin, and they may start to feel like they should worship them or something. So what do? They pick them up and take them in their caves away from the danger of the meteorites. And of course, the solar batteries can't get sunlight, and that was the end of the story. that part of the story, I had to end it some way. So.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, though. But right in the middle of this, you also have this idea of the first fusers. Now that's also something that probably maybe people that are just starting to read the Urantia book or heard of it, and even people in the Urantia community, you don't hear them talk much about the first fusers, even though it's something that's in there. I've only heard maybe a handful of people ever mention it. So what are these folks? What's going on with the first fusers according to the Urantia book?
Well, to back up just a little bit, I used a family as the protagonist that run throughout this novel. They witness the non-breathers and all that, and one member of the family, the old grandfather, he discovers the Urantia book. It was shown to him by his deceased wife, and he starts reading up about fusers. And he also finds the part about the non-breathers, and he says, "Look at this," to his family. And his daughter happens to be a big supervisor at NASA, and she was also an atheist. So the plot is rather complicated, and in the middle of the book, I introduce a study group, a Urantia Book study group that is reading about fusing. And this is something that has happened on our planet before. The authors of the UB tell us that Enoch and Elijah both fused during their lifetime. And fusion, according to what they tell us, is something that happens to spiritually advanced human beings. If you've achieved the 7 psychic circles, which is a sort of a grading system for the measure of advancement of a human soul. If you've accomplished all the tasks that are involved with passing through the 7 psychic circles, and you've made contact with your with your indwelling spirit, which is the Spirit of God. That's another thing that is in the Urantia book, and something Jesus talked about when he was here. He said that the kingdom of God was within, and he was referring to these indwelling God fragments that we all have. And once we make contact with this indwelling fragment, we are considered to be spiritually advanced. We know God from an intimate place, having had personal religious experience, genuine personal religious experience with this indwelling fragment of God, who has revealed the God of the universe. And when that happens, the person is eligible for fusion. And what happens at fusion is that the body is instantly consumed, and the soul and the indwelling fragment of God become as one, and they appear on dimension worlds, the first heaven that the Urantia book tells us we're all destined to ascend to when we die. If we don't die, we can fuse. That is the alternate to death. So here we are in the middle of my book, and there's a study group. They're talking about fusion, and they're wondering, has anybody done this since Elijah and Enoch? And they speculate, but there's really no proof that anybody has disappeared in the chariots of fire, as it's referred to in the Bible. And suddenly, one of the members of the study group says, "Well, why don't we try? Why can't, if Elijah and Enoch did it in one short lifetime, and they didn't have the advantages that we have with the revelations in the Urantia book. Why can't we do that? And so it became a topic of speculation and possibility. And before you know it, they were all talking about, okay, let's do it. And so I spent about, I don't know, 6 or 8 chapters of them going through all the hoops that they need to become spiritually advanced beings, to actually know and do God's will while they're still living, and to pass through all the 7 psychic circles and achieve everything that needs to be done prior to fusion. So all this is going on while the non-breathers are being discovered, and I'm given frequent news reports about it during the talk about the study group who wants to fuse. So 5 years goes by. The second probe gets to Ganymede, and that buzzes in the news. At the same time, the study group, there's 7 of them. These people go to the Sea of Galilee. They've got a message from God that they're ready for fusion, and that He wants it to take place on the Sea of Galilee, and He wants it to be a public event so that people can see that there's a new way of dying, of transcending death, and that they too can leave the planet in chariots of fire. So they go to Galilee, they check into a hotel, they have their last meal, they leave their passports on the table, and they take a boat. And they rent a boat and go out in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, and there they are fused. They become... They're no longer candidates for fusion. They become actual fusers with their indwelling adjuster, as it's called in the Urantia book, this God fragment. And they tell us what it's like when fusion happens. Apparently, there is a tremendous release of energy and light, and there are beings who assist in this, celestial beings, invisible beings to us, who lift the fusion candidates up into the atmosphere, and there's a tremendous explosion, and they disappear. Their bodies are consumed, and they next appear on the mansion worlds in the presence of their guardian seraphim, their angels. So that pretty much winds up the 2 stories, the 2 intertwined stories, except that I had the grandfather who discovered the Urantia book and who read about fusion and the non-breathers and told his NASA employee daughter about him. I had him become a fusion candidate, and so he follows the pattern of the 7 who went to the Sea of Galilee, and he fuses. And then people all around the planet start fusing. First there's a group of 12, then there's a group of 150 or so, and people can no longer deny that there are fusers. These people, before they fuse, they're telling their families, I'm going to leave the planet in a chariot of fire. And some religions are denying it, and they're saying, and some countries are outlawing it, and it becomes a concern to morticians who are losing business. So it's a wonderful story that I really enjoyed writing, and I think people will enjoy it. It's a little far-fetched, I'll admit, but I don't believe it's out of the realm of plausibility. These 2 events are inevitable. We're going to find beings living on other planets sooner or later, and there's going to be fusion. The Urantia Book tells us that our destiny as a planet is going to be in the ages of light and life, and during those advanced ages, people will cease to die. More and more, death will not be the avenue of exit to the mansion worlds. There will be ceremonies. Their families will gather around, and they will go to the temple that is God's temple here on earth, a heavenly place where they go and they're lifted up by the celestial beings. Their bodies are consumed and they disappear. So,
yeah, I've read in a couple of books where they said that the fusion is often what is mistaken in some mainstream Christian groups as the rapture. It's not going to be this mass disappearance, but rather the people who are fusing and leaving the planet. And again, there will be, as your book talks about, there will be some issues with that by some people, whether it be religious or morticians or whomever. Yeah. It's definitely interesting, how the Urantia Book puts these things forth. And I could go on and tell stories about why I find, the fusers interesting and plausible and something that, could certainly happen. It just kind of blows my mind when I think about some of the stories I've heard, some of the experiences I've had.
Just about everybody, if you get to talking to them, has had some sort of supernatural experience, even though they may poo-poo others. But it's just a pretty common thing.
It is. I always believe that the spirit world, God and his angels and the celestials are, right there close to us, and they're always reaching out to us. And I think those supernatural experiences that so many of us have, it's part of the experience of God in our lives, because religion, if somebody's indoctrinated into religion, you could take that away from somebody. They could lose faith, depending on trials, tribulations, or, whatever the case may be. But if somebody has an experience where they experienced God in some way, or they had one of those, supernatural experiences, or they had, an angelic encounter and they know it, and it wasn't a delusion, that's something, that experience you can't take away, and so I think it's part of the experience of God that we all have for some reason. It's kind of like to get our roots growing in, the spiritual rather than in the religious.
Yeah, and like you say, these become pivotal experiences in people's lives. They don't forget it. I've had a few myself of a different order, but the interesting part is just about every experience people talk about that's supernatural is unique.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's so much out there that nobody knows. Especially, the Urantia Book just gives us an astonishing amount of detail about the universe. I wish more people would delve into it or were interested in it. A lot of people have been turned off by religion. A lot of people are leaving religion because of, they just can't believe in hell or a mean-spirited God or whatever. So,
yeah, a lot of people, if they find it and they read it, like myself, when I started reading it, one of the things that kind of hooked me in was that they were things. And, I can only say that, God, thought adjuster, brought these things to mind earlier in my life before I even knew what the Urantia Book was. I always tell the story when I talk about the Urantia Book, and this was probably in the later 90s. I was headed over to a friend's house, and while I was driving, I was just thinking about spiritual things, as I, often did and often do. I kind of, eat, breathe, and sleep, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm driving along, and all of a sudden it hit me. I was like, gee, I wonder if we got it all wrong. That, that maybe our soul is a fragment of God that's within us. And if we live the right way, we do the right thing, we live according to the will of God, it fuses with our personality, and that becomes the soul that and I mentioned this to a couple of people, and most of them, just kind of looked at me and, had the, yeah, but, and they would change the subject to something completely different because this was such an alien idea. And, I have no idea where that thought came from. Well, I do now, but, here I am years later, reading the Urantia Book going, holy cow, there's that thought, that I had years ago that just came out of nowhere,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can I do a plug for the project that I'm working on now?
Oh, definitely. Go right ahead.
There's a guy in Israel named Gabriel Rimberg who started a many-sided project called the Center for Unity, and its purpose is to retell Jesus's life in a Wikipedia-like form, in a cinematic form, and with a museum. And of course, this is all based on part 4 of the Urantia Book, which has 800 pages. The retelling of Jesus' life. It's a wonderful complement to the Bible, but it reveals so much more, including the so-called lost years of his life. But Gabriel, when he found the Urantia Book, he was so impressed with the story of Jesus as it's told in the UB that he decided, and one of the things that the authors tell us is that the most important thing we can do in life is to study the life and teachings of Jesus. So he took this to heart, and he started this project, and it grew and it grew and it grew. And there are now about 40 of us, and I'm on the part of the team that's writing what you might call a Jesusopedia instead of a Wikipedia, but we follow the Wikipedia format where there's like I'm working on the person right now of Mary, and I'm writing what. If you went to Wikipedia and you found Mary, well, you would find pages and pages of stuff that has been accumulated over the centuries, and the Urantia Book adds many more pages to that, and on each of these pages there are links. There are clickable links. If I write a sentence about Mary and Joseph, well, Joseph is a hot link that you can click, and then you'll see his story. And so there are hundreds of links throughout the text, just like on Wikipedia. So the metaverse, as it's called, the Wikipedia portion of the Center for Unity project, is what I'm working on. And there's a team in New Orleans who is putting together a thing called Cinematic Jesus. And that's going to be, maybe you've heard of The Chosen?
Yes.
Real popular now, and so Jesus is getting some traction with programs like that, and also I've heard that there's someone who reads the Urantia Book who is involved with The Chosen. But this will be a mini episode presentation of Jesus' life as it's told in the Urantia Book, and it's going to cost billions of dollars, and they have the CGI equipment already available, and they have their team, and they're writing scripts, and it's really going to happen. And it's something that I've always longed for. If part 4 of the Urantia Book, the Jesus part, could be made into a multi-episode presentation. And so they're actually doing it, and it's going to be first rate. They've got the pilot just queued up now, and they're working on casting and other aspects of it. So there you've got the cinematic. So the third part of the Center for Unity project is a museum. And this museum has already been arranged for. It sits on the shores of Galilee, and it has the Jesus boat. I don't know if you've heard about the boat that they found sunken in the Sea of Galilee, and it was carbon dated to the time of Jesus. And there's a possibility that he and Zebedee, who owned a boat shop that Jesus worked in, crafted this boat. They say it was well made, and it was typical of the boats of that time. And the Urantia Book tells us that most of the boats on the Sea of Galilee during Jesus' time were made by Zebedee's boat shop. Mm-hmm. And it was Jesus and Zebedee who worked out the formula for this advanced type of boat. But anyway, this museum is going to have multimedia presentation, kind of like they're doing with Van Gogh and other artists. Mm-hmm. There's an 800-seat auditorium, and it has a view of the Sea of Galilee, and it's a really nice design architecturally. So it's all coming together. The funding is happening. We've got a big team working on it, and it's exciting stuff. And I really feel like that it's God's will that this come about. And I get a good feeling about being on this team. And I want everybody to participate or donate or do whatever they can to help make it happen.
Yeah, if you can send me a link where they could donate, I will certainly put that in the podcast description. And I've actually heard of this, and I'm really looking forward to all this happening as well, and seeing this series that they're putting together. That's something that I'd really like to see. So yeah, definitely send along the link, and I will include that in the description.
All right. Good.
So that should be about a wrap. And hey, man, this was a great conversation. I really appreciate you doing this show this week.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
And I hope a personal question. Do you know if I know some of your books are on audiobook on Audible? Do you know if the non-breathers and first fusers will be on Audible or just the paperback Kindle version?
I decided not to do Audible because I did a few of my books in Audible, and they just sat there and didn't do anything, and it's quite expensive. But I found out recently that you can download an app from Speechify, and it will read any text to you, free.
Yeah.
So I thought, no wonder there's nobody using Audible anymore. Even Kindle, I heard, has a button now where it will read to you.
Yeah.
So Audible really isn't necessary anymore, and it's probably going to fall away.
Yeah, that's true. The Kindle Fires, always did have that text to speech where it'll just read it to you, and you can, whether you want the voice to be, from England or Australia or male or female.
Yeah, it seems kind of strange that Audible would do that since they're part of Amazon, but they shot themselves in the foot. But it's a good thing. I guess, Speechify was probably competing with them, and they had to. So.
Right. But anyhow, once again, I appreciate you doing the show. This was a great conversation, and I hope people enjoy it and maybe donate a little to the cause to get, a lot of this life and teachings of Jesus work out there in different formats, because I think it's definitely something that the world needs. I think religion has done itself a great disservice. I think many times they've done Jesus a great disservice, and it's time to bring back, the loving, kind, wise Jesus, and the loving God, not this, angry hellfire and brimstone deity that that's just really no way to get people wanting to live for God. Follow me or else. That's human beings don't respond well to the violent ultimatum.
Yeah. Well, I think you're doing the world a good service in what you do, presenting these secondary works like this and letting people talk about what they've got going and their enthusiasm and excitement for this incredible revelation we have, Urantia Book.
Yeah, I try to have a wide variety of topics. I myself, of course, I'm a Urantia Book reader. I'm interested in other spiritual paths that, and I did a show, I don't know if you saw it, how spiritualism and spiritism, which is the French version of spiritualism, a lot of people think it's just like sitting around, like talking to dead people, but there's a lot of teachings in there people aren't even aware of, and how many of them actually coincide with the Urantia Book, the levels of heaven, the different planets and dimensions, where there's other life forms. And even in the French version of spiritism agrees with the Urantia Book. And this was back in the 1800s when it was codified by a man named Allan Kardec. That it, one of the teachings is that at one point in human history, we are going to encounter beings from another planet, and it's actually going to be very beneficial to our planet. It's going to revitalize our religion and our technology and the way we see the world and the universe and one another. So many things in common with the Urantia Book that I just think it's incredible and also exciting to see, how so many of these things kind of merge, but they're often overlooked by mainstream religion that categorizes them as, evil or deceptive or, works of the devil or, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, Godspeed, Paul.
Yes, sir. Well, God bless. And thanks again for doing the show. And maybe you'll come back for a third time and talk about future work and update us on the Unity Project.
You're welcome. You're sure welcome. Anytime.
All right. So everybody, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show, and I'll see you next time here on the Spirit Side. God bless everyone.